Hi, everyone. Welcome to the New Jersey Libertarian candidate live stream. We go live every Thursday, 6:30, and if schedules allow, with all the candidates, we also go live on Wednesdays and Fridays. I'm here with Vic Kaplan, who's running as a Libertarian for Governor of New Jersey, and I'm running for District 24, a state assembly seat, and my name is Lana Ligia. Dustin is working today, so he's not going to be able to join us, but Dustin Maggard is running for District 8 as a write-in candidate. If you have any questions for us, you can put them in the chat. You can email me, you can message us, get a hold of us in some sort of way, and we'll try to answer your questions. Even if the live stream is over, still put it in the comments and we'll answer it the next time that we go live. So, Vic, how are you?
Fine, thank you. I'm doing okay. How are you doing?
I'm fine. So, you and I went to a rally in, where were we? We were in Newark on Monday. How was that for you?
I enjoyed it. It was great. It was quite a lot of people who were protesting the Palantir and certainly the federal immigration policy, which I made a point to a number of people is unconstitutional. It's not authorized by Congress under Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution. It's just not mentioned there. I could have expanded it more. That the one of the grievances of the Declaration of Independence was that the king was restricting immigration to the colonies, and that is not what the colonists wanted. So that's why they did. One of the reasons why they did not include it in the Constitution. So no, I really enjoyed it. There were speakers. Now I'm sure that there were disagreements on other issues, even if I kind of did agree with them on that one topic. But I don't think that the constitutional argument is one that too many of the people there would use. But in terms of the federal jurisdiction is concerned, but certainly there was one issue that we could all agree. I could also mention that this is not unusual at all for people who think that this is just strange or bizarre. Certainly during the even going back to the Vietnam War and all the way into the Iraq War, libertarians have been in protests with people who have agreed with them on one or two issues. And in the case of the Iraq War, it was certainly the anti-war position that did unite libertarians with some of the other people. And when it comes to the Vietnam War, well, it was the Vietnam War that certainly united libertarians with other people as well. So I certainly didn't mind marching with other people. That we agreed on one issue doesn't mean we have to agree on all issues. So that's how I felt about it. It was great. We were marching from one street to another. There was quite a lot of people there. Loud sort of a group chanting of slogans, and it just felt a lot of energy in that group, and it just felt like people they're sort of united in for one cause. So I think it really felt great.
Yeah, a lot of people are afraid of working together with parties that have goals that are completely opposite to perhaps the party that you're aligned with. And this group seemed like they were progressives. They didn't really say anything on their website or Facebook about whether they were progressive or like what party they're with, because I think they're not necessarily political in that way. But they did seem progressive by the way they were talking, and that's fine. Obviously, libertarians are not progressives, but there are certain issues that I would say are not even really partisan, that they affect all of us, regardless of where you are in the political spectrum. And when something is unconstitutional, when something is authoritarian, that's something that we all need to come together on. And ICE is one of those things where it affects everyone, not just immigrants. It affects every single one of us. And if the federal government has the authority to make this unconstitutional, authoritarian police force, that should terrify everyone. And we should all come together to work against that. So, we were the only libertarians in the group, I think, marching, and that's fine. because we need to unite at this point in time with anyone who will fight against it. That's my perspective on it anyway. We can fight about the other things later. We can talk about taxes and whether we need to only tax billionaires or whatever progressives are talking about right now. We can argue about that later. This is an incredibly pressing matter that affects everyone.
Right. Well, no, I absolutely agree with you. And I just want to add too that if you look at the War for Independence, you had people as different political views, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, uniting with each other to fight against the British government in the War for Independence. They had a lot of political disagreements, as of course we learned in school. But the reality is that they felt that for the purpose of bringing forth the independence of the colonies, that they needed to work together to achieve that. Now, obviously, I have a lot of disagreements with Thomas Jefferson, naturally, and John Adams. Thomas Jefferson, obviously, slavery is probably the biggest thing that comes to mind, of course. But this is just shows you the necessity of kind of working together for a common cause. And during the Vietnam War, the same thing happened, right? We've had people, there were people who are progressives, people who were libertarians, all being opposed to the war in Vietnam, and during the Iraq War, the same thing happened. So I don't, and honestly, if if we had a government that decided to go totally totalitarian at some point, I'm sure that a lot of people, if they felt that um, their liberty was at stake, not just of one group of people, but everybody's who did not agree with what the government was doing. I'm sure that people would feel even more compelled to join others to and unite with others to oppose uh, you know that hypothetical policy, whatever it might be. I mean, look, and then we've seen this before when it comes to the Patriot Act, when it comes to other proposals where you had people unite with each other across the political aisle. I certainly don't see there's anything unusual about it. I mean, we had in Congress we had Ron Paul work with the Dennis Kucinich, someone who's a Republican and a Democrat working together against specific pieces of legislation that both of them felt was threatening our liberty. So I absolutely have no issue doing that. That doesn't mean you have to agree with the other side on everything, but on matters that you can agree on, and if you do believe those issues are important, yeah, I absolutely do believe that it's more than okay to join forces. Especially if one believes that joining forces with other people can help defeat whatever measure that is in question. I mean, the strength is in numbers. Also, I think that it does kind of help that when you see that people that are against something, right, they're protesting against a policy, that it's not just sort of one group of people, right? You see a diversity of opinions and a diversity of people in terms of their political views. It's not just, like during the Iraq War, for example, it wasn't just people on the progressive side that were marching against the war. There were people who were on the libertarian side that were marching against the war. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If you feel strongly about something, I mean, what can be worse than war, right? When I mean the state, it just has the control over whether you live or die. And in those cases where issues of such importance, yeah, I mean, absolutely don't see any issue with joining with other people across the sort of the ideological across the ideology. And even if the issue are you think are less important, I do think that it's definitely useful to join with other people. Again, just to be clear, doesn't mean you have to agree with everything. And if you're in a protest and people start bringing up other slogans, like that's fine, whatever. It doesn't mean it doesn't you don't have to agree with on everything. But I think that it is important that the people feel strongly about something, that they march together with other people, if even if they don't agree with them. I understand everyone makes their individual decision whether or not to do that, and if some people are comfortable, I understand. I personally don't have an issue with that. I'm fully willing to work with people on on another side on issues that I think are important. I mean, obviously I'm going to have some exceptions for certain groups, certainly. There's but
Yeah, certainly. Like, I don't think I would attend I don't think I'd attend a march with, some National Socialists or
Yeah,
something like that. I don't think I'd do that. That's
right. Yeah,
that's a little too far, I think, in one direction or the other.
I wouldn't want to march with LaRouchites that either, or David Duke. That kind of reminds me. David Duke at one point he endorsed Jill Stein for for uh, for president, and of course Jill Stein she rejected his endorsement just because so I certainly wouldn't wouldn't want to march with someone like that, or like you mentioned, the National Socialists that, or LaRouchites. That's yeah, would never. So I mean, I would make a few exceptions certainly, or so yeah, within reason, of course.
Yeah, another thing that they were protesting against, aside from ICE, obviously, is Palantir, and that's something that I think everyone can also come together on against, because these AI surveillance projects that they're trying to get people on board for should scare everyone. The surveillance state is something that affects everyone. Historically, so the surveillance state has affected, environmental groups, libertarians, different groups that call themselves patriots, whatever. It's all over the political spectrum. We're being surveilled, and it's getting worse and worse and worse, especially with the capability technology has now for facial recognition and truly like stalking you. It's not just an online thing anymore, right? It's not just systems communicating with you, like they're tracking you. This is actually becoming a problem in Texas. I believe in Austin, lawmakers were trying to pass facial recognition, a bill that allowed their street surveillance to have facial recognition abilities, and it didn't pass because people lost their minds over it, rightfully so. Um, so when it comes to ICE and immigration, they were also protesting that, as well as, So I don't know if you have an opinion on that big.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the Palantir is something that was, of course, warned about before the 2024 election. I mean, it was made very clear that if Trump were to be elected president, that Peter Thiel and the Palantir, that would come into fruition on a national level. So this is not, I mean, none of this is really surprising. This was talked about before the 2024 election. I think some people did not want to believe it. But no, it was out there. So like, there's literally nothing surprising about this. And there's some people just, they had wishful thinking that this wouldn't happen because they were hoping for the best. But they, I think they should have heeded to all the warnings that were coming out before the election. I mean, none of this is surprising. It's like people get surprised about Project 2025 when it was talked about before the election. I mean, I don't understand what is surprising about it when it was like discussed before the 2024 election.
Yeah,
The voters had all
I
the
had a lot of
information to cast their votes.
I had a lot of people tell me that Project 2025 was a conspiracy and no one would ever do that, and it's like, how do you think that these historical events happen? They're not fiction. They happen, and a lot of times they happen really fast. When things are happening really fast, the Trump administration hasn't even been in power for a year yet, and look at everything that's been happening. That every day it's something new, something outrageous, or someone's rights are being violated, and it happens really, really fast. And it's challenging for me right now because, prior to this, I try to calmly and graciously um, educate people that no, you can't trust your government. Like, when people say, "Oh, they would never do that," yes, they absolutely would. And if you think they haven't been doing it in secret this entire time, then you're really not paying attention. And now they're just doing it out in the open. Like, you cannot trust your government. But now I'm having trouble. Like, a lot of the people who voted for Trump are having regrets, obviously, because any sane person who's barely paying attention would probably have regrets. And it's hard to be like, well, you kind of voted for this and now we're all screwed. I'm struggling with those types of feelings with people who voted this in.
Right. No. Yeah. No. I totally agree with you, Lana, and I think that I think there are people that cared a lot about the one specific topic, which was immigration, and they felt that we had an open border, when actually before the election we did not. I mean, that this is something that, I mean, even though this is something that Trump talked about during the election campaign throughout 2024, the reality was that the Biden administration, I mean, pretty much before 2024, more like in 2023, essentially beefed up the border security. And what Trump was referring to was happening, earlier. And I think what happened was the Biden administration didn't want to try to claim any credit for it. What they did, because I think that might have upset some of the supporters within the Democratic Party. But for the Kamala Harris's campaign, that had the result of basically, the Trump campaign talking about how we have an open border when we were not, and convincing millions of people that that was indeed the case, that the Biden administration wasn't trying to restrict immigration in any way, while throughout the 2024 that's exactly what was happening. It's certainly didn't help Kamala Harris, because then she was viewed as somebody that would just continue the Biden administration policies, which in 2024 were different than they were earlier. But I think that a lot of people became convinced, first of all, that the undocumented immigrants are mostly criminal, not just that they're undocumented, but are violent criminals. And that rhetoric, was certainly coming from President Trump, from the time he announced his presidential campaign in 2015, and kind of continued unabated for years. And I think millions of people have come to believe that, and millions of people have come to believe, which is not true. And according to all the statistics, because the undocumented immigrants are the least likely group of people to commit crimes. The people born in the United States, kind of the number one group, followed by the legal immigrants. And that does make sense, of course. The undocumented immigrant would be foolish to would be less likely to commit a crime knowing that he or she would likely be deported. So, but millions of people have come to believe this, and the ICE statistics actually show that, yeah, those millions of people were wrong. Millions of people who believed that undocumented immigrants were violent criminals, because the ICE statistics show that the people they have arrested, right? So 70% were not convicted of any crimes, right? And so the 30%, that does include kind of a traffic violations and whatnot, minor crimes, and then about 94% have not have not been convicted of violent crimes. So only 6% were convicted of violent crimes. So and that's the people that the ICE has been arresting. So I think while that has become a reality, certainly in 2025, as far as numbers go, and that they're being revealed. But I think the issue is that you already have had millions of people convinced by the rhetoric coming from President Trump, and repeated by so many other people. I mean, it's I don't think it's going to be possible for people to kind of unwind, and it's like, okay, well, I've been hearing this for all these years. Now I have to believe that this is not true. I think that a lot of people, some of the people who voted for Trump, I'm sure they really wanted President Trump to close the border, or beef up the border security. And for them, it was if not the only, one of the most important issues, if not the only issue. And I think they voted accordingly. I think everything else they may not have paid attention to. I mean, Trump did promise before the election he would go after people who disagree with him on the issue of Palestine, as far as college students were concerned coming from other countries. He did promise that he would go after them and kick them out of the country. I mean, he did promise that. I mean, none of this stuff is surprising. And so the tariffs, that's not surprising either. He ran on that platform of raising tariffs. He might have included other countries that he did not originally include. But, if he believed that the tariff policy was a good policy economically, then why be surprised? Then he's like, well, why stop with Mexico and Canada? Why not extend it to other countries, right? So, I mean, none of this stuff is really surprising. And besides, he was saying that before the election, that as president of the United States, that the Constitution allows him to do whatever he wanted to do. That there are no checks and balances when it comes to the presidential power. So why is anyone surprised that he is, signing all these executive orders and claiming that as president he has the power to do anything he wants?
Yeah, and unfortunately, well, I say fan base, but his cult base wants him to be able to have unilateral power like that. That's what they want. Speaking of his executive orders, at this point, most people know that he signed an executive order making Antifa an official domestic terrorist organization, which is dumb for a couple of reasons. And we talked about this at the last live stream, but now that a little time has gone by, we see federal agents arresting who they've deemed to be Antifa on site. They don't wait for them to break something or attack them. They're jumping out of vans now and just arresting people who are protesting. I'm not really sure how they're assuming that they're Antifa, but are you concerned, or are you as concerned as I am, that they're just going to start labeling every single group that disagrees with the Trump administration or disagrees with ICE as a terrorist organization, and then just start indiscriminately arresting protesters?
Yeah, no, I actually do have that concern. I mean, the executive order that he signed, I mean, does talk about like going after groups that are have. I mean, they call it an anti-immigrant, anti-immigrant, do not anti-government. They're opposed to government policy when it comes to immigration. So that could mean, I mean,
well, I mean, like, do you think libertarians are next? Because we're very loud about our anti-government, anti-state sentiments.
I mean, yeah, I don't. I mean, I mean anything. I guess anything is possible. I mean, if you look at the some of the organizations that were listed by Marco Rubio, I mean, he actually considered declaring the CARE a terrorist organization. Now he did not that he did it regarding other groups, but he didn't do it regarding CARE. But he did say that he openly was considering it, just because they have a different viewpoint. I mean, and it's not for actually involving in anything that is violent. This is just for having a different viewpoint. And I don't, I mean, that's basically the justification that he used as the Secretary of State to deny visas to people coming from other countries because of the political viewpoints they held. Not because those political viewpoints are violent, but simply because those viewpoints do not include a support for a foreign government that they disagree with politically, and that was enough for the Secretary of State to deny those people visas and entry into the United States just because they disagree politically on an issue, So I mean, I find it to be disturbing, to say the least, because what's to stop people who are in the United States or who are born in the United States, whether they are or not, to have their free speech being limited, restricted, because they hold certain political viewpoints that the government doesn't agree with.
Yeah, and I don't know why the double standard is not obvious to a lot of these people, where we just were forced to mourn somebody who died expressing their freedom of speech for 3 weeks or something. Yet here they are arresting who they've deemed to be Antifa and deemed to be arbitrarily a domestic terrorist group for protesting, for using their right to assemble, and they're arresting them. Also, I don't know if you read what Trump said on his Truth Social, whatever it's called, that he's authorizing them to open fire on these Antifa quote unquote terrorists.
Right. No, I have read that, and no, that's absolutely disturbing because basically, and this is something that goes back even further back to when President George W. Bush was president. Essentially, the idea was the Attorney General would declare any group to be a terrorist organization and go after it. I mean, it didn't matter who decides what is one and what isn't one. And I think I mentioned a few podcast earlier that there's certain groups were declared one, and then they're just removed from the list for purely political reasons. You know, but it's not like they have changed in any way. No, I find that to be no, I absolutely find that to be disturbing. And I think what people just fail to understand is, and I know I mentioned this before, is that people who are cheerleading a lot of these policies, they may not think about what might happen when he's going to be the president from a different party. I mean, if it's okay for the president of the United States to send National Guard troops to blue cities, if you will. What's stopping the Democratic president from sending National Guard troops to like red states and areas that are predominantly Republican? I mean, what basis would then the people on the other side argue that the president cannot do these things when they were all happening under the current government, and those people were claiming that they were just fine, and they saw nothing wrong with any of that. So yeah, no, this is I think it's opening up a whole can of worms. I I find disturbing is the overall direction where you have these policies being put in place, which of course then lead to protests and opposition. And you have the what I mentioned, I think one of the articles I wrote, the strategy of tension that was used in Italy in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where the state would have a certain set of policies, knowing full well that it would provoke a response, which then the state would deal with actual kind of more violence. And then, of course, once there would be a response from the other side, that they would use that as a justification to crack down on protests and opposition even more, hoping that they would defeat it not through the ballot box but through violence. And I think this is exactly where this is leading. I think that because, of course, the idea is that when it comes to one side, right, they can do as far as, some of the people supporting them, as far as they're concerned, as far as that side, they can do anything they want. But if there's any kind of response from the other side, that they can say, well, see, there's violence on this side, so now we have to respond even more and try to crack down on these people. And I think this is the real danger, that this could very much escalate into something bigger than what it is right now, into actual social unrest. Which is why I think that this is something that has to be watched, and I think more people need to be aware of this and not try to, rhetorically or any other way, try to add fuel to the fire.
Since we're getting at the halfway mark and we got quite a few more viewers, I just want to remind everyone that, we're here to answer your questions as candidates. If you have any questions about libertarianism, about the party, or about our campaigns, or something that's important to you that's going on in New Jersey, or even on a federal level, we'll answer your question. You can just put it in the chat, or you can email me, message me, however you can. So last month, it came out that about 8,000 new registered voters signed up in New Jersey, and over 7,000 of them were unaffiliated. I don't know what your thoughts on that are, Vic, but it seems like people are starting to have a clearer view of what's happening, that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are not offering them actual solutions, and that they just keep lying and perpetuating the same things over and over again. And I do think social media has helped with that, particularly platforms like TikTok, which is why I think they tried to ban it. I do think that TikTok is a way of like peer-to-peer communication, like direct peer-to-peer communication, and a lot of knowledge is spread on that platform. But why do you think so many unaffiliated people registered last month?
Right. Thank you for that, Lana. So I do believe that there are a number of people. I think they're definitely getting disappointed, discouraged. I definitely think some of the people who voted for Trump, for sure, are disappointed. I mean, I know he got about 50%, slightly below 50%. But looking at the job approval, it does appear that there are people that have kind of been disappointed, and after voting for Trump. I do think that I think with certain people too, is that they're looking at the cost of living. They see the cost of living in New Jersey is increasing. I think they're disappointed because they just find the life in New Jersey unaffordable. And I think that some people have memories of certainly Republican governors, not just Democratic governors, and they see that, perhaps some people see that regardless of who's in power, life is not getting better; it's getting worse. I'm sure they see that on the national level too. Doesn't matter the president of which party is in power, life isn't getting better. The cost of living is increasing. The value of the dollar is decreasing. The cost of living is increasing. So things are not getting better. Things are getting worse, and I think that might very well be the reason for that. I think that especially with young people, the um, the difficulty of getting affordable housing in the state of New Jersey, I think that's a big problem. We have some of the highest uh, costs for housing in the nation. We have the highest property taxes in the country, of course, and the cost of living itself is through the roof. That's not counting all the other taxes that people pay. So I think that I think that's definitely one of the explanations. I think it's just the disappointment that things are not getting better in terms of the cost of living. That things are getting worse, and yeah, that's certainly one of my theories.
Well, I'm hoping that unaffiliated voters or independent voters that are registering as that for the first time are not just thinking about voting differently, but actually do so, because I think we really need it right now. But speaking of the upcoming election, of course, so I believe it was last week that Jack and um, Cheryl were kind of at right neck and neck at the same, according to the last poll. I'm trying to look it up right now on my computer, but I can't find it. Didn't want to give the wrong number. But after Jack illegally released, from my perspective, I know there's an argument against it or for it. I mean, um, Cheryl's private information from her veteran records and all that, and that whole scandal came out. Then he dropped 6 to 8 points. Do you think that releasing that information had any effect on his polling numbers?
Well, I mean, I know there's a thank you for that. I know there's a Fox News poll that had him down by 8 points. Now I know that I know that the Trump typically would say about Fox News polls he doesn't trust them, but this is supposed to be a poll that's favorable to Jack Ciattarelli, and I know there was another poll that had them neck and neck. So I don't. But that was one poll, right? There's just one poll, so I kind of viewed that as an outlier because if all the other polls show 7 to 8 point difference, and one poll, has them neck and neck, I would most likely side with the other polls and not view that one single poll as a it's like, oh wow, they're actually neck and neck. No, that's just one poll, right? So, but I do think that I don't think it probably would have had too much of a difference because I honestly think that this election, I mean, I think part of it is going to be definitely be driven by Trump's popularity. And he's, job approval is in the low 40s in New Jersey, by all indication. And I don't think this is helping Jack Ciattarelli at all. I think it's dragging him down. I think it would have been a closer election if Kamala Harris would have been president. But we usually have in New Jersey a kind of a every 4 years, and really starting with 1989, that the party that wins the House the following year, the winner of the gubernatorial race ends up being from the opposite party, then controls the White House. The only exception after that was the 2021 election, right? So we do, and it makes sense because the people that are likely to turn out in the gubernatorial election are more likely to be people who want to express their opposition to the president of the United States. And if that president happens to be a Republican, then more Democrats turn out. And if that president is a Democrat, then more Republicans turn out. So, like I said, 2021, there was a very close election. It seemed to be there was an exception to that. But starting with 1989, you basically have an anti-White House sort of election. So I think that is, if I had to, I had to make a prediction. I mean, I think that's what it would more likely to be. So yeah, that's how I feel about it. It basically more people would show up who are opposed to President Trump than who support him. Just based on previous elections.
So I meant to ask you this earlier when we were talking about Trump and immigration, but the government is officially shut down. Yay, at least from a libertarian perspective. Of course, it won't stay like that forever, unfortunately. But they are continuing the ICE raids and arrests and detainments and all that, despite the government being shut down, because they consider it to be a essential function of the government, because they consider it to be a border security, well, not border security, but like they keep treating the immigrants as invaders, right? Instead of just people who are trying to come here and work and live. And so when they see it from the perspective of invaders, they see it as we're like in an active war zone, and therefore I should be continuing even during the government shutdown.
Yeah, I think that's crazy. Of course, the immigrants are not invaders. If they're invaders, like I now said this before, that means that people who are born here, their ancestors were invaders. That doesn't make any sense. It's like, oh no, they came here legal. Well, here's the problem though. Like 120 years ago, and I know, I'm keep repeating myself, but yes, Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution does not list immigration as a federal power. It only lists naturalization, which is citizenship. And the reason for that is, I mean, you can really blame it on Thomas Jefferson and our founding fathers. Declaration of Independence, one of the grievances list was that the king was restricting immigration, and there was opposition to that. So there was no desire to have federal government control immigration. That's why it's not in the Constitution. Uh, the And so when it did get involved in immigration, actually now you do see what has happened. It incentivized undocumented immigration by only restricting immigration to uh, family members and visa people who come on work visas. So that has increased the undocumented immigration, especially after 1996, when now you could no longer even get legalized through employers and family members. So then more people ended up staying in the United States as opposed to working, part of the time in the United States and returning to Mexico and other countries. So after 96, you have a huge increase in undocumented immigration. And of course, the federal government has also incentivized deportations by profiting from them. So it has incentivized both undocumented immigration and deportations as well. So yeah, after all, you can't have deportations after bringing enough people in who are undocumented, right? I mean, once you get all those people, and now you can deport them and make money of that from that. So I absolutely think it's ridiculous that this is still continuing. Again, according to the ICE statistics, I mentioned before, right? 70% have not been. I know I'm repeating myself, right? Have not been convicted of any crimes, and 94% have not been convicted of violent crimes. Yeah, they should just allow people to come here and work. And that's my policy. That's what I would support. Have them go through background checks and let them come here. I mean, because removing them from our society just first of all, it increases cost on the American people, and because now you're whatever they were producing, picking up the crops, right, in the field, and anything that they were doing, now that's not done anymore. So that actually increases cost on the American people, and besides the kind of a moral and human side of it, of separating family members and removing parents from their kids and all that. So I think that it has had a debilitating effect on our economy. 40% increase in the price of vegetables in July, et cetera, et cetera. Not just because of tariffs, but because people have been removed from the economy either through deportations, and other people just stop showing up. And you have about 20-30% of farm workers are undocumented. I mean, yes, going after undocumented immigrants will have a detrimental effect on farm workers. So, I mean, I always thought that was common sense. And of course, the only way you can have this type of a deportation policy is if you go after people who look Latino, which the Supreme Court recently said was okay. To go after people based on their appearance and based on their acts in the line of work. Now, Judge Kavanaugh argued that the idea would this would be like a temporary apprehension, but in the case of certainly one person, it ended up being 3 days with no charges being filed against him and just released with no explanation. But the idea that the Supreme Court said that you can just apprehend people based on their appearance and based on their accent and based on their line of work, I mean, that creates all kinds of certainly possibilities of just going after people just because they look Latino, which I know that we had the vice president recently comment that he says look at all the hospitals, you have undocumented immigrants lining up. How does he know that people are undocumented immigrants? And is that something that's written on their foreheads that they're undocumented?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, well, aside from the fact that you can't temporarily take someone's rights away, right? That's not a thing. They either have them or they don't. But also, there's no such thing as a temporary government anything, whether it's a program or a measure or, look what happened after 9/11. Right? Nothing. It's been how many years, and we still have essentially the same protocols in place for border security and uh, national security and all these things that never went away because it never does. So I do want to talk about something that we don't talk about a whole lot on these live streams, but we often, both of us as candidates, get these types of questions a lot, even though for some reason we just don't organically talk about it. And that is firearm regulation in New Jersey. New Jersey is one of the most heavily regulated states when it comes to firearms and weapons in general, probably behind, I'm assuming, California and New York, although I don't know what the actual list is. And so I have a list of different statutes here in New Jersey, starting with one that I already made a post about on my social media, but open it up here. It's 2C 39.5, which is unlawful possession of weapons, which basically says, and I'm paraphrasing and kind of summing it up here because it's kind of a long statute, but basically anything from machine guns to rifles, shotguns, handguns, anything like that, unless you have a license, is illegal to own in your house. And to be clear, you don't need to be doing anything with it for it to be illegal. You don't need to be pointing it at somebody. It doesn't have to be on your person or in your car. It just you don't need to be committing a crime with it or threatening somebody with it. It just needs to exist in your home, and that is illegal. For example, a handgun that has no license, without a license, is a second-degree gun charge, which is minimum 5 to 10 years in prison. So my question, and just to continue on with the statute, it also says here, it's a very long statute. Can't find it, but the other weapons such as baseball bats, brass knuckles, things like that, or knives, unless it's clearly apparent that it's being used for lawful purposes, are also illegal, which means that if you're caught with a bat, but you're at a baseball game, then that's probably what you're using it for. But if you have a baseball bat that's clearly being used for self-defense, such as it's leaning against the wall next to your bed, or it's in your truck's back seat doing nothing, not next to a mitt or anything like that, or a baseball, it's considered to be a weapon and is therefore illegal. So my question to you, Vic, is do you think that the existence of a weapon or a firearm without it being used in in an aggression or a threat to somebody else, should it be illegal?
No, I don't think so. My view is that first of all, the first example you mentioned, well, what if you're just a gun collector? I mean, you have antique guns. I mean, they don't. They're weapons from the 1800s. They certainly are not. I don't think I've
They
ever
actually
seen.
mention antique guns
Oh, really? Okay.
in the statute, and it
Hmm.
says, if I can find it here, I can't find it, but it specifically did mention antique guns, and you still need a license if you're caught with an antique gun, whether it works or not. Whether you can take it off the wall and out of the frame and shoot it at somebody or not, without a license, it is a very serious crime in New Jersey.
Yeah, I think I would say I would disagree with that. I mean, I remember I was at the Poconos. I'm trying to think it was Poconos Bazaar, I don't. It's not there anymore. It's East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. They don't have that place is not up anymore. I've seen plenty of guns. I mean, this is in Pennsylvania. Antique guns from the 1800s, early 1900s, and in Derringer. And I never thought for a second that they're would have to come. I mean, if this was in New Jersey, they would have to come with with a license. To me, that just seems that's I would disagree with that. You can also have a gun passed from father to son, right? I mean, what if it, right? So I don't, I don't agree with that. That they need to. I don't think that weapon by itself, if it's not being used to commit a crime, then I don't think that it should be criminalized, the possession of the weapon, unless it is being used to commit an actual crime, right? To murder somebody, it shouldn't be considered a criminal object, criminalized as far as possession is concerned. So yeah, I certainly don't agree with that. I think that your other example, if you could remind me, was about
Oh, like a baseball bat, for
oh yeah, the
example.
baseball bat. Yeah, no, I think that's ridiculous. You could have a baseball bat for your protection, as you mentioned, right near your near your bed. And why should it be criminalized? What if what if you're afraid there's going to be like into you live in an area where there's a lot of break-ins, and what if you decide to use that baseball bat as a weapon? Somebody breaks into your house. I do believe, if I'm not mistaken, Lana, but in Britain, I don't know if it's on a local level, but they did have laws. They do have laws that if you actually use a baseball bat to protect yourself, you could be charged with a crime. So
Yes, and that's part of the reason why this law is so ridiculous is because one, you haven't even committed a crime with this quote unquote weapon. But yes, if you illegally own a weapon and you use it in an actual self-defense situation, someone breaks into your house, whatever, and you use it, not only would you be charged with unlawful possession, but you could potentially be charged with murder and a whole list of other things.
no, I totally disagree with that. So, I mean, I mentioned this before, but not in this live stream. But yeah, I believe in natural rights, the right of life, liberty, and property. So, as an individual, you have an absolute right to protect your life, protect your liberty, and protect your property. And so, the idea that if you do that, that somehow the object itself becomes something that is to be criminalized. Yeah, that's not something I can agree with. I mean, I understand that only if an object is used to commit a crime do I think it should be criminalized. I mean, so some people, there are people who are gun collectors, right? It's not like their primary purpose for having guns is to collect them, not to commit crime. And why should that behavior that is not that is victimless, right? That's nonviolent, victimless. When it comes to being a gun collector, should be criminalized. To me, it doesn't make any sense. I don't agree with that. Only if a weapon is being used to actually commit a crime, to murder somebody, that's not for the purpose of self-defense. Only in that case, it's not that the weapon should be criminalized; the behavior should be criminalized. So the object itself, the gun, should be criminalized, but the act of committing murder, that's the act that should be criminalized. Is the persons who should be criminalized, the person's behavior should be criminalized, not the act of using a weapon.
Right, I completely agree with you. Like you mentioned Britain, and I believe that you also can't walk around with like kitchen knives unless you're a chef, which is
Yeah.
obviously
That is
really.
interesting. Yeah, that is interesting. You mentioned that because I know the Sikhs, they are, according to the religion, are according to the tradition, right? They are meant to walk with a dagger. It's part of, but it is part of the religion. Now, of course, I understand that because of the laws, right, that do exist, that's not. You really don't see that happening, right? Walking around with So, but no, I don't see why that should be that should be a crime. I really don't see why that should be a crime. I mean, and by the way, this is interesting. I think I read somewhere a lot of famous people had pocket knives. They walk to school with pocket knives, right, to protect themselves.
Oh yeah, so
Yeah,
I used to live in the South, and in the South, literally everybody has a knife in their pocket for a million different reasons. You should have a knife in your pocket, not just for self defense, but it's just really useful. You get
Sure.
You're on the side of the road and you need a knife to whatever. Like it's a useful tool,
Right.
and that people just don't do that here.
Well, no, no, I know, but back in the day in the United States, people like quite a number of famous people would carry like pocket knives. I mean, not now. I'm saying back in the in the earlier times in the United States.
Right.
But yeah, I don't. I just don't see the like to me an object is an object, and if a person is committing a crime, because then the question becomes like where do you draw the line, right? I mean, you ban knives, you ban like what else? I mean, at some point it just becomes, I think, pretty ridiculous because people with knives are certainly capable of committing violent crimes, like stabbing people. And there was in China years ago, there was a knife attack, and this one person killed a whole bunch of people with a knife. But and yeah, so countries where, for example, they don't have, maybe they have as many use of the firearms, they have use of other weapons such as knives, for example, right? So, but if somebody wants to murder somebody, right, it doesn't have to be with a it doesn't have to be with a gun. It could be with some other object, right? If that is the person's goal, if they want to kill somebody. Now, I understand that there's there would be a discussion of how many people can one murder with one weapon as opposed to the other weapon, but I don't see. But I think, in my view, is and there's definitely an argument to be made about that. Is that the more people are armed, like the more the perpetrator knows that the more people are armed, the less likely that person is to commit murder, right? Is to commit a violent crime if that person is aware that other people have weapons with them, right? So that actually would be an argument for for more people getting armed, becoming armed, not less. So
Yeah, and unfortunately, they have here in a different statute to describe what they consider to be a firearm, and it goes into the springs and pressure and air, which is why like BB guns and um, airsoft guns are considered to be weapons because of how the mechanism works inside the item. At least that's my understanding. I'm not an expert. But because of that, there have been a lot of situations where they've considered pepper spray and bear spray to be a weapon, and people have gotten in trouble for this. I'm not sure if they actually ended up repealing that law, because how do you not walk around with pepper spray? But I feel like the ultimate goal in New Jersey is not necessarily keeping anyone safe, because if that were true, then you wouldn't have a problem with baseball bats or people walking around with pocket knives or even pepper spray, bear spray. Like we just had a bear walk into a grocery store the other day, and was just walking around eating the food. Like we do have bears here, right? So it's not really about people staying safe. They just don't want you to be armed. They want you to rely on having to call 911, and rely on the police here.
right, no, I agree, and I mean I think that pepper spray, that's definitely. I mean, people don't want to have guns. I think pepper spray can be. I guess one alternative if they're not, because I understand not everyone is into like people are just not into carrying a gun, but I can definitely see how pepper spray can definitely be used for to protect, to defend oneself against possible attackers. So yeah, no, I'm all for that. I mean, if the if at a minimum, I wish we could have, certainly pepper sprays be legalized everywhere. But yeah, that's because I mean, I would hate the person to be any individual to be left totally defenseless.
Yeah, things like tasers, and I'm talking about not like a taser gun, but those little like handheld taser things that those are also illegal.
Mm,
I think anything over a 3-inch knife is also illegal, which anything, I mean, it's pretty useless as a self defense weapon. So, but my next thing is purchasing a firearm. So, you need a license to own a firearm, but then you also need a separate permit to purchase a handgun, and a separate permit to purchase a rifle, and a separate permit to purchase whatever, right? And those only last, I believe, 6 months.
mm.
And I suppose their logic behind that is to prevent people from buying too many guns at once and then using it for evil or whatever. Obviously, if somebody really wanted to do something bad enough, one as we always say, they would just do it illegally, or two, they would just wait 5 years until they can amass the amount of weapons that they want and then commit the crime that they wanted to do. Do you think that that's an effective way to keep people safe? That's my question.
That's a good question. I don't. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the issue might be that if well, it depends, I guess, what type of a gun it is, right? What is the type of a gun that is in question? I mean, what if the person loses? Well, I don't know how do you lose a gun, but I mean, it's I don't. I mean, it would be actually interesting to compare. I mean, I'm just kind of trying to think of it kind of slightly a different way. Places where you do have these restrictions versus states where you don't have these restrictions. And I know there are many factors that can be involved here, but I wonder if this actually does anything to reduce the murder rates, or the rate of break-ins. Well, the murder rate. I would be curious to kind of compare the two. So I mean, that's what will be going through my mind right now. Yeah, and I could say that of course people should have an access to. Uh, right, there should be any limits, but that's kind of the first thing that comes to my mind, because I mean, if the people arguing for this, that's the argument that would be using, that if you restrict the number of guns you can buy per time period, I mean, my question would be, does it really lead to the reduction of crime? I mean, and kind of leaving philosophy aside, right, leaving ideology aside and individual rights, I would be curious to see if that actually has if they are, because if that's the argument, and it's wrong, then um, it would be a good idea to use that. I mean, after all, John Lott, right, with his book More Guns, Less Crime, I mean, it does rely not just like on kind of a moral philosophy, also he also relies on specific examples and data. So
Okay, so I have to correct myself. It's not 6 months. The permit, I just looked at it. The permit is actually 90 days. It's been a while since I
all right, that's fine.
applied for a permit to purchase a firearm. Because I do have my license and such. I'm just not an expert. So 90 days. You can buy a handgun for personal protection, whatever, and then you have to wait 90 days, and you have to reapply for another permit. Is
Mhm.
my understanding. I don't think that it stops anyone from doing anything. I actually don't think any of these regulations are going to stop anyone from doing anything. When I lived in Houston, I went to a pawn shop, paid $500-600 for a 1911, and I went home with a gun, and that was it. Of course, he ran my ID and whatever system they have over there, but generally, like, you can walk into a store and walk out with a gun, and then I could walk, if I wanted to, I could walk right back in and buy another one. It's that easy in Texas. I didn't feel any less safe. In fact, I feel less safe here because I'm walking around with basically nothing, because I have my firearms license, and I have a gun. Of course, my permit to purchase expired, but so I can't buy another one. But I can't really walk around with it or use it, so it's essentially useless. It's basically a giant paperweight, right? Even if I got my carry permit, I all the restrictions New Jersey has on where you could wear your firearm is basically somebody's private property who has given you permission, or your own property. That essentially renders it useless, you know?
Mhm. Right. No, I understand that. I mean, I mean, I kind of, when I'm thinking about it, I don't see. I mean, I understand why they might want to do that, but I mean, there's really not, because if you think about it, the number of like mass shooters. Now that I'm thinking about it, isn't it really like, you don't have people, right? I mean, as tragic as it is, right, targeting like, killing 20. I mean, luckily the good thing is that it's not happening more often. I mean, obviously, it is happening in the United States, but we shouldn't forget we have 320 million people in the United States. What I'm saying is that if this was really the case, that that these restrictions, these limits were like very, very effective, right? Then I think there would have been a lot more of these like mass shootings involving multiple weapons, right? We just don't see that. So yeah, I mean, when I think about it, I also think like if somebody wants to get an illegal weapon, if they really wanted to do that, I could see that even with all the restrictions, right, they would be able to do that. Like they would be able to. If somebody was really that set on and doing quite a lot of harm, I don't think they would have any difficulty getting access to those guns. While regular people who want to follow the law, they would be the ones that would be left defenseless.
Okay, so we are at about an hour. I don't know if you want to say any last things about, firearms, the Second Amendment, or anything before we end.
Yeah, no, I thought that was a very productive conversation. Because I when I hear a question, I kind of have to think about. I try to think about different angles. No, definitely, my position is that an individual, owning an object, whatever that object is, that if that object isn't, by itself, it shouldn't be criminalized. So the behavior of an individual should be criminalized if that person has committed murder. Right? We already have laws against that. But the weapon itself, like I said, it could be used for all kinds of reasons, including self-defense and collection, and many others, right? So I don't think that is something that should be criminalized. The act of owning, a particular object. So that's how I feel about it. And when it comes to defense, yes, you have a right to life, liberty, and property. These are natural rights, the rights we're born with, and you have every right to protect your life, liberty, and property with weapons. So absolutely. So that's what I would say. And please feel free to check out my campaign, Vic Kaplan for Governor at vicforliberty.com, vic4liberty.com. Also Lana Lagia's campaign for City Assembly, lanalagia.com. It's at the bottom of the screen. And also Dustin Maggart, who's also running for State Assembly. Please feel free to visit our website, to donate, and to volunteer. We're always looking for that. So thank you. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, and just real quick about my position on firearms, it's very simple. I think any restrictions on purchasing firearms are unconstitutional. I moved to New Jersey in 2017, and I have never seen so many people who were just terrified, shaking, terrified about firearms, and so squeamish about handling them or even talking about them. Until I moved here, it was just kind of amazing. Maybe it was just such a drastic contrast from being in Texas to here. And then prior to Texas, I was in Colorado, and before that, I was in Georgia, which are all very firearm friendly states, at least at the time that I was living there. So coming up here, it was just kind of, I suppose, a culture shock, seeing how many people were just totally against it and didn't understand the value of being able to defend yourself, and the value of that freedom of and independence, as opposed to relying on government agents, police officers, and the government to protect you and save you from things, preventing people who would use firearms for self-defense or to use it lawfully. Uh, Only hurts them. Like, you're not going to prevent crime from happening or from people getting illegal guns. It's just never going to happen. They're going to get a hold of it, and they're going to have a gun, and you won't. And I'd rather have a gun than not in that sort of situation. So if it was, if it was up to me, we'd repeal every single regulation, restriction, permitting requirement, everything regarding firearms.
Right. Thank you for that, Lana. No, I just wanted to add that I think that you mentioning the gun culture. Yeah, like I, for example, did not grow up in any type of a gun culture. I mean, I shot an air gun when I was 9 years old, and that was like the extent of my sort of experience. And I never actually like shot a gun until, well, I mean, an actual gun until I guess this year, no, right? So it just wasn't something, I think, because I grew up in a city when I was a kid, and then I just lived in New Jersey, and I guess the areas that I lived, they were urban, and just wasn't like, I guess, part of the gun culture. It's not it's not a But look, I mean, I definitely absolutely support one's right to defend oneself, believe in natural right. I it's just not something that I grew up in, and I'm sure that other people are similar in New Jersey. Not everyone, obviously. There are people that have grown up in a gun culture. I guess it also depends, like what part of New Jersey. Not to stereotype, but it
No,
does
it's
depend.
true. The more rural areas are probably more gun friendly, like Sussex County, Burlington, those types of areas where it's a bit more rural. But I've actually had, you mentioned pocket knives and just knives in general, and I've had real life conversations with people in New Jersey where it's like, what do you need a pocket knife at all times of the day for? And to me, it's kind of like having a phone. Like there's so many uses for a pocket knife or just a knife in general. Especially since I have animals, I go outside, whatever. You're cutting cord, you're cutting this and that, whatever. And a pocket knife specifically, you could be using for 1,000 different things, quite literally. So, like when someone looks at me in my eyes, is what do you need a knife for every day, every second of the day for? I'm like, why do you need your phone on you every second of the day? Because it's useful when you need a tool. I don't understand. That's one thing about New Jersey I've never quite um, have gotten used to, even though I've been here for almost 10 years. I don't understand the reliance on other people for your protection and livelihood. I don't know. I can't relate to it at all. To rely on police and the government to take care of me and to protect me. I don't understand that.
Right. Well, no, I hear you, and yeah, it's just a very different. Yeah, no, it's there are parts of New Jersey there. It's very different. Like I said, I went to an urban school. I mean, urban school area, suburban rather, and it just never they were just never talked about. Guns just wasn't a thing, I guess. And yeah, I guess it depends the where what you call it, where you live, and what the environment is like around. And so yeah, I mean, I would. Yeah, you're definitely right. It has goes more along the kind of rural, suburban, urban areas, right? You don't see a whole lot of that in urban areas for sure. Yeah,
Yeah, and like I said, when I was in Texas, I didn't have a license. I walked into a pawn shop and I bought a gun and I went home, and I had that gun for a while. Um, and I didn't commit any crimes with it somehow magically. You know what I mean? Because I don't want to hurt people or commit acts of aggression. It was purely for self defense. So people who have no intention of hurting other people aren't are the ones who are suffering the most from these types of regulations.
right.
So
No, I listen. I couldn't agree with you more. The certainly in areas with a high level of crime, and I mean, I'm just using just common sense here that a perpetrator, if the perpetrator thinks that the people inside their homes they're highly unlikely to have a gun. I mean, I think that if anything, probably sure makes it more likely that the person will commit a crime, knowing that like none of the residents are actually have guns, right? So I mean, I'm not a gun expert. I'm not, but just using just common sense. I mean, certain things do seem kind of obvious and understandable. I mean, nobody's going to have a. I mean, who wants to have a gun-free zone in sign in front of their house? I mean, that would
yeah,
be that would be kind of silly, right?
people do though. You've
Well,
seen
no,
those signs.
okay. No, I mean, I wouldn't want to. No, people say like be aware of the dog, but like, put that kind of a sign in front of the house, and that would be. I mean, I understand some people would do that, but like that's. I mean, to me that people can
I
do
actually have seen yard signs that say, that sign that everybody likes, this house is a, and it'll list like five things, and one of them will say it's a gun-free zone, and I'm like, why would you advertise that? But okay.
I mean, everyone can choose their. I mean, I would definitely. I mean, I totally understand. I mean, look, you can have an install a security alarm system, or all kinds of. I mean, yeah, there are other, uh, you know, but and people do that. Like they give that type of warning there, but yeah, but that type of advertisement, gun-free zone, that just wouldn't. Yeah, that's probably not the best idea. I mean, but people can choose whatever they do, whatever they want. But I definitely do think that there are places. Last thing I'll say. I mean, there are places where you would have like a lot of break-ins. I mean, not every location is the same, right? There are certain places that have a higher rate of sort of burglaries and then others. And yes, and why shouldn't one be able to protect oneself and protect one's property? So just to me, that just makes sense.
Yep, I completely agree. So we're gonna end it there. We're gonna go live again tomorrow at 6:30. Hopefully, Dustin and Bruno and the other candidates can join. But I will definitely be there. Vic, I think you're definitely going to be there.
Yeah.
So I will see everybody tomorrow at 6:30. Everyone have a good night. And if you have any questions, you can put them in the comment section and we'll answer them tomorrow. All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.